Okay. Mhm. Oh, hey, Nath, how are you? Stoked you're here. We're just kind of hanging out until we get Michelle on. She's going to be our Mezcal panelist. I'm going to start getting the Mezcals lined up and get myself some glasses. Yeah. Let's see, where did I put? Hey, Michelle, what's happening? I need to make you a panelist, I think. Oh, okay. Okay. So I just need to see where you are. Okay, so participants. Okay, there you go. Attendees, Michelle Ball, allow to talk. You promote to panelist. No. Let's see.
I think that worked. Or will work. I just gotta start my video.
Cool. Love it. So that's a good sign that people are showing up and that they don't need a password. So good. And we got Tommy Schmitz and Don and Josh are already in. Welcome, guys. Looking forward to talking about Mezcal. I am going to go get my Mezcals all lined up and check my book. Yes.
It says unable to start video because your host has stopped it.
Huh. Okay, let's see. Stopped it.
That's just the error it's given me.
It says it's running and I can hear you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna hang up.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Perfect. And then let's see, stop video. It should be running. Choose virtual background. I don't need to do that. For some reason, my picture is not showing up.
I see you. Well,
you do see me.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good sign. I do not see you.
Yeah, it says I can't start my video because the host has stopped it.
Okay, let me see what I can do. Participants, Jeremy's in here. So, okay, attendees, panelists. Okay.
Oh.
Okay, hold on. Forbid record. Why don't I see the little video thing that's red, but I try to touch it. Chat, make host. Okay, what if I make you a host?
Sure.
All right. See if you can make your camera work. Yeah, I saw.
That would work.
Aha!
Excellent.
Beautiful stuff. Look at us. Beautiful.
We figured it out.
I'm gonna go grab my mezcal and my glasses.
Sounds good.
What are the little gourd things that you drink at are called?
I still did not look that up. I should look that up. I should know that. I will find out. No, I think I'm good.
crazy stuff because it's sort of like when you do these Zoom meetings, instead of like, at some point I have to figure out how to like lift the curtain and we just start, instead of like basically having backstage completely open to everyone who's watching.
Yeah.
I've been joining a lot of Zoom meetings a little bit early, and I've been having that same deal where it seems like it seems like you kind of have to just like jump in and see the setup, and then people have to say, okay, now we are starting. I'm sure there's a way. So this is my
It's a hicora or an hicora. Jiccara, and that's the heavy metal guy. Yeah.
hicora, and then this is the one you gave me.
Yes.
Thank you. A hicora.
A hicora. I'm sure I'm butchering that Spanish.
I've also done shots out of like little like
votives.
The little they look like tiny little red clay pots.
Yeah.
Yeah, those were fun.
Yeah, you can use those too.
Love it. I got a lot of comments when I put the mezcals that we're putting up on Reddit. A lot of people were like, dude, who do you know? Where did you get those? Those don't normally exist in the United States. So I am so looking forward to this.
Yay. And I would suggest if we start with one, well, I didn't give you an espadín, did I? Do you have an espadín that you were starting with?
I have an elote. I have the Mezcal Vago elote. And I'm going to print out my questions real quick.
Okay.
And we got about 10 minutes. All right. All right, I'm going to go check in with the missus, make sure she is good, and then I will be ready to rock. Well, hey, everybody. Hey, Beth and Zin Man and Dom's in the house and Christy's in the house and Josh is in the house and Don's in the house and Tommy. Lovely to have you guys here. We're just kind of organizing, getting our stuff together. I'm getting my glasses ready. These are the unofficial tasting glasses because I love these for all spirits. Bonus question. Is there a proper glass for the formal evaluation of mezcal?
I don't think there's a specific glass. I'm using something like this.
Yeah.
So it's small. I think glass is better. And then having like a slightly tapered top to trap the volatile esters, a little bit.
Not difficult to smell. I mean, it's definitely an aggressive spirit.
Yeah. And so you wouldn't want to put your nose right up on it. You kind of want to like waft it down here.
Looking for Brett.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How's Germs doing down there?
He's good. He's right here. He can say hello.
Hi, Jeremy.
Hey man, how you doing?
Good. Haven't had any more bears?
No, I don't go outside.
That was crazy.
Yeah, it's a little nuts. No, I'm doing great. I'm going to be watching in the other room, drinking a little mezcal as well, inviting a few friends to join us. So yeah.
Lovely.
Yay.
How fun is that?
Have fun.
Indeed. Looking forward. All right. So we got about 5 minutes. I am watching both the chat here. Let's see. From Jeff B. We are actually going to keep Michelle and I are going to be on camera. And then we're going to, I'm going to be looking at Facebook for comments and questions. I'm going to be looking at this chat for questions, but just for bandwidth's sake, to keep the quality, we're just gonna basically have Michelle and I as presenters on the pictures, and I'm going to do everything I can not to go into a diabetic low.
Yeah. Oh God.
I know in Mezcal, like honestly, like if I start low and I start drinking Mezcal, I will not be able to tell the difference between hypoglycemia and ethanol intoxication. So,
Oh my God. Oh God.
you want to know something freaking crazy about tonic water? For to make a nice sized drink with tonic water, how many grams of carbs do you think? In the form of high fructose corn syrup.
I have no idea. I don't drink that.
Coca-Cola.
Really?
It's got almost 40 grams of carbs per serving.
So you want high carbs? I thought you wouldn't want carbs.
For some reason, I worked out like a lot today, and I tend to burn a lot of carbs when I'm working or I'm focused or I'm presenting. So I just know that I'm going to be going a little bit low. And right now my blood sugar is at 80. I just ate a big kind of like handful of chips. So, it's just, it is what it is. It's all good, and it's all well and good. I'm just going to take little sips of this and not go overt so I don't end up like at 200.
Oh my God. What's ideal? Like what's an ideal blood sugar?
100 for glucose level, right across the board. 100 is absolutely, we call it the, the unicorn. Like if you catch a unicorn in the wild, right, get your blood sugar right at 100. It's not really blood sugar though, because my monitor actually measures interstitial fluid in between the skin and the bloodstream. So it lags about 15 minutes behind my actual blood sugar. So I have Lancets and a blood testing kit as well. So my blood is usually 15 minutes more accurate than my interstitial fluid. So if I notice I'm going high or low, I'll break out and do a little blood just to make sure. And on top of this all, my constant glucose monitor is my sensor's crapping out in about 30 minutes. So I'm going to be flying pretty much blind for the last half hour of the show. My choice was I could have either, I did this thing called hot soaking. It's kind of weird. I feel a little bit, but you can see I've got two monitors here, if you can see them.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
This one is active. So both of these have a special wire that goes under my skin and into my interstitial fluid. This transmitter needs to be switched from this monitor to this monitor. Normally you just put the new sensor on right as you're going to take the other sensor off. But if you put the new sensor on and you let it soak in your interstitial fluid for about 6 hours, you get like 50% more accuracy as soon as you start getting a reading. But it takes automatically 2 hours to warm up.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, didn't think you were going to see my stomach, did you? But no, it's obviously very important. All right. So by the way, if anyone, as you guys are, thank you so much. Glad you're here, Scott. Stoked you're here. And then Jeff, and then and is Jeff B? Jeff B. Jeff are you Jeff Furtenicht? Just let me know, because Jeff is I was gonna have Jeff. Jeff lived in Oaxaca for a long time and knows quite a bit about the culture. So I was gonna invite him in the last 10 minutes or so to just kind of give his perspective.
Yeah, that'd be great. We were supposed to connect when we were on our last trip there, but it was a whirlwind of a trip, so we just didn't have any time.
And I'm sure, drinking mezcal doesn't make it any easier to do tons of stuff. And then Anoth, we'll talk about aerators later, but I know that for real simplicity, just the little Venturi works extraordinarily well. You just basically put this over your glass and you pour wine in it, and it doesn't require a stand or anything. I mean, a decantation works really well. A clean blender works really well. So when you see that, do consider that. And I will put that over there so I am easily able to see what's going on. And we are at, let's see, what's the Apple time says 4:58.
Do you have a cutoff time for this webinar? How do you usually do it?
No, I like an hour.
Okay.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so that probably is Jeff. So what I'm going to do, Jeff is another sort of Mezcal expert that as I was going through this whole process and thinking about what we're going to do and what we're going to talk about, I did want Jeff to be part of the conversation, but I know that Michelle and I have a lot to talk about. So Jeff's going to take some notes. He's going to add some stuff at the end. And then we're going to have a wonderful time here talking about all these things. As we are about 1 minute away from the official beginning, I am going to actually start recording. And now we're recording. And welcome everybody to Day Drinking with Wes Hagen and Michelle Ball from Bottle Branding. I did wear the official Bottle Branding shirt.
I love it.
Tell us a little bit about what you do for a living.
So right now I am where did my voice go? So my husband and I have a small business. So basically we offer graphic design, photography, and video production for the wine industry specifically. I'm a graphic designer. I also do a lot of video editing, and then he does photography, video production, and then I'm also a wine writer for Tasting Panel and Somm Journal. So I think that helps with the video editing, kind of storytelling. So that's kind of our day job. And then we recently started a happy show called Good Morning Lompoc, just during this awful time to make people feel a little bit better about the world. And we share happy news and funny things. And we've been having an amazing time with that. So
give me an example of some happy news.
Well, I mean, just fun news, right? So, I mean, birthday drive-bys, we've kind of been celebrating those. We have some fun with kids. So kids will come up with these ideas of like being a news anchor on their doorstep and report on a baby bird on their porch. And then we have another kid that's going to be coming up on Monday that's going to show us how to get ready for a Zoom interview.
Nice.
And then we have Brad, which is Jeremy's brother / alter ego, who does cocktails. And we, like the other day, we reported on the bear in Lompoc that was touring around downtown Lompoc early in the morning on Tuesday morning. So just stuff like that, stuff to take people's mind off all the other crap.
Cool. And when you want to do something fun for yourself and you have some extra time, how are you filling your time during sequestration / quarantine?
Just that show. I mean, I have no free time right now.
Are you not
no. What?
You're not cooking or baking?
I was when all this started, and then we started the show. The show takes about 30 hours a week for me.
Wow.
Because I'm pre-producing a lot of content. So I'm mainly cooking when I have recipes for the show. So I was making pasta, fresh pasta for the show. I made bagels the other day. I made a friend some salted caramel ice cream. So for birthday, so yeah.
Boil your bagels?
I do. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay, so what we always do here on Day Drinking, we have a tradition. We start with something and we drink it.
Okay.
So out of all the things that we're tasting, where should we start? What should we start with? And then you can give maybe a little bit of a tasting note just to get right into the mezcal stuff.
Sure. I would start, I put it in this bottle. We got everything in water bottles, but this is Mexicanito.
Holy God, this liquid changed my life. Someone told me that this doesn't exist in the United States, and as a result, I had to taste it, and it made the Tobola taste like vodka. Wow. All right.
So this is made by a female mezcalera. Her name is Berta Vasquez, and she is in the region called San Balthazar, and I'm going to butcher Spanish. If you are I apologize in advance. San Balthazar Chichicapam. I'm sure Jeff is like, and she took over her husband's palenque when he passed away several years ago. So she's one of the few female mezcaleras, and she calls it Mexicanito, but it's actually the Mexicano variety. And she calls it Mexicanito just because she says she loves it so much.
Oh, because that's Chen. German, it's Chen. Like if it's a cut, or Greta or little Greta would be Gretchen. That's cool. Is there a reason we're starting with this, or are we just starting with something extraordinary?
So I wanted to start with this mostly because ladies first, right?
Nice.
And it is one of my favorites in the lineup. I thought it was stunning. Everything she does is teeny tiny batches, and she actually will go out and harvest them herself. I mean, she's a little tiny lady. I'd love to share my screen and show you what she looks like. Let me see.
Is she Oaxacan?
She is a Oaxacan. Let's
Well,
see.
Oaxacans are, yeah, they're amazingly compact folk.
This is Berta.
Oh, hi, Bertha.
She's so cute. And then this is her extracting some samples in her house.
Is that just bamboo? It's like a bamboo thief?
Yeah, they're like, I think they're bamboo. I didn't ask, actually. And then this was inside the little place. I mean, this is all the mezcal that she has to sell. It's just that little tiny room. And there's me. And this is Bertha. There's her photo.
And would these be called piñas once they're cut like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I'll stop the share there. But yeah, she was adorable. I just love this. So this is the variety is Mexicano, and then the species name is root. Let's see. I wrote it down. Can never remember the species. The species name for that agave is Rhodocantha.
Okay.
And it takes about 10 to 12 years to mature these particular agaves before they can be harvested.
Are these farmed or collected?
These are wild.
These are wild.
Yeah, so these are collected.
What's considered a good yield if you walk into the mountains at 8 in the morning and you come back at 4 in the afternoon? Should you have as much as you can carry? I mean, do you bring a donkey?
I think that's how. Yeah, I think what Dari, he's our friend and amazing. If you ever go to Oaxaca, use Experience Agave. He's just a local Oaxacan, and he was telling me that basically she'll bring her little truck, and she's got a donkey, and she will hike up to the top of the hill, and she'll harvest the agave, and she'll roll them down the hill, and then she'll put them on the donkey to carry them the rest of the way to her truck. But everything she does is teeny tiny batches. So when we went, she hardly had anything to sell us.
So what do you pay for this down there, and what would you pay for it here? To me, this seems like a 3-figure spirit at least.
It should be, yeah. I think we paid something around like $7 a liter.
What?
Yeah, it was pretty nuts.
So I guess that makes like the up pricing of cocaine seem crazy. I mean, that's $7 to $150. This is amazing. Describe. I don't have a mezcal vocabulary. I have a wine vocabulary. Which is how. What are some terms that are commonly used for this style or for mezcal? How would you describe it?
I wouldn't. So first of all, I should. Full disclosure, I'm not a mezcal expert. I'm a mezcal enthusiast that has tried to learn as much as I can about it. We've been to Oaxaca 3 times. So it's nowhere near, I'm sure, other people. But every time we go, we try to completely immerse ourselves in it and learn as much as we can. So I would say I still have more of a wine vocabulary when it comes to tasting and smelling mezcal. So when I first smelled this, I was impressed by the sweet, spicy aromas in it. It's very alluring, right? It doesn't have the aggressive smokiness that you get from some mezcals. I almost get like a little bit of like a cinnamon quality to it too, and then definitely like that aloe.
Yeah, no, aloe is a really good call because when I'm drinking a cactus-based spirit, I want to taste the cactus. That's one reason why I love Fortaleza so much, because that Blanco tequila just has, it's like an agave razor, it just has that wonderful, crisp, bright flavor.
Yeah.
To me, this has a fair amount of smoke. Like if this was a Scotch, I would put it probably in the lowland or maybe the Islay style, in the sense that it has a fair amount of smoke. Now, does that smokiness come from the production?
Yeah, I would say this much smokiness comes from just the roasting of the agave. So a lot of mezcals, so some mezcals can be acutely smoky, and a lot of that does have to do with smoke taint, where the fire from the distillation is really close to the catchment tank where the liquid's coming out. And that's sometimes a choice. It's a stylistic choice. Some villages apparently like the smokier mezcal. to me, this isn't as smoky as some of the other ones I've tried. So I don't think that she necessarily has that, approach. You're always going to get a little bit of smokiness from mezcal due to the roasting of the agaves.
Now, say you were like a Lagavulin guy and you like tons of peat and you like your liquor to smell smoky to an extreme. Is there a region or a producer that makes, like, is there a Rombauer of mezcal?
In Neowatlan, that little village, they're known for doing the single distillation, but it's really it's a double distillation in a refrescador style method. And the ones I've had from there, I think, are pretty smoky. The one of them I gave to you, the Tepestate. So that's the Gozona mezcal. Okay. And that one I think is really smoky in comparison.
Do we want to go there next?
We can, just for.
We'll try a mezcal. I'll ask you a question. If I was going to ask you in 5 minutes or less to sort of describe, so the piñas arrive at the production facility, which would it be a fattoria, or how? I mean, I'm sorry, that'd be
a palenque.
A palenque.
And I'm sorry butchering that.
Generally, a palenque is going to be lean-to outside. It's not going to be inside. Is it?
Yep. Outside.
Okay, so what happens once the piñas arrive?
So once the piñas arrive, they cut off those are also pencas, the leaves on the which they should already be cut off, but sometimes people might trim them down a little bit more, and then they put them in their earthen oven, and then, scratch that. They get the oven prepped, so they have their hornos. I have pictures too I can show you. Would that be helpful?
Absolutely.
Okay.
1,000 words. And if you guys have any questions or styles or anything else, just let us know, and I'll bring them to Michelle.
Yeah. So let's see. Okay. So this would be like one of the ovens, for example, and then the coals would be below. This oven had just been opened up. So this isn't an oven that's prepped and ready to go. This is an oven that was like taken apart. Let me show you one that's prepped. So this would be an oven. These are two ovens, and see the one on the left is empty. Well, my left is empty. The big one's empty. The one on the right has the hot coals in there. So underneath the coals is wood. So they've started a fire with wood. They put the coals on top. They wait until it gets really hot. And then they add agave fibers. Let's see. So they toss the agave fibers on the coals to cover those up so that they don't burn the piñas. Okay. And then
And that's just the waste product from the previous distillation?
Exactly. And then let's see, what's the next one? That's the covering of the oven. So then they put the agaves into the oven, and then they cover it with tarps, and then they cover that with dirt. So they have to create a perfect seal so that they can bake. This had a lot of agaves, so that's why it's a little bit more above ground. So they create a mound over the top of that, and then they bake those agaves for usually 3 days. Wow. And it depends on the size of the agave in terms of the length of baking time, right? So if they're smaller agaves, or if they cut them up, it'd probably be more, still be about 2 days, 2 to 3 days, and then maybe longer for some bigger agaves. And then after they're done cooking, they uncover the oven. So they're taking them out. And then they kind of look like, we're taking the agaves out. This was because we were participating in a little camp there. So we're taking them out of the oven. And then they hack them up.
Now, do they ooze?
Well, this was hacked up before. Sorry, this was the before. And then they're tossing the fibers in. Sorry. What were you gonna say?
No, do they ooze into the fire? Are they losing the kind of cooked syrup? Or
no, they're pretty starchy.
Okay.
So afterwards, so this is what they look like after they're roasted. So they're starchy and pretty firm. And so after that, some places leave them out and allow them to collect more of the wild yeast for a few days. And then they're going to crush them. So let's see. Oven, perfect day. Where'd the crush go?
Could be under fermentation. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, so they crush them, usually with this big Tajon, and that crushes up the agave. And then it was ferment that, thank you.
And is the donkey have a muzzle on so it doesn't eat it?
Well, the muzzle's on probably so the donkey doesn't bite anybody, but yeah, but also for eating. And then they're going to, after they packed them up, they crush it. They get all the fibers together, right? Scrape them all out from the crushed thing. They put them in tanks, and the tanks are made from whatever type of wood is available. So often oak, but they might be other types of wood as well. And then the agave fibers are put in the tank. It's filled with water, and then that's allowed to go through see, and I had more there. So crushing,
Nice.
with the Tajon. He's collecting the fibers afterwards. This would be at Real Minero, but he puts them in those tanks, and then water's added, and then fermentation.
Do you know about, is there a level of percentage of sugar within the liquid? Do you know?
Yeah, I tried to ask some people that, and I didn't get a perfect answer. So I don't know. I think my Spanish would have to be much better.
Now, so is that what's coming? What's actually just fermented before distillation? Is that called the pulque?
No, pulque is totally different.
So it's a totally different process of making undistilled liquor.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Pulque's never distilled. I think it only reaches like 3 to 5% alcohol tops.
Well,
I think pulque more like kombucha.
Okay. And I would say then pulque, I mean, if they get do you know, my guess is it's probably 5 to 7% alcohol, maybe before it goes into the still.
Yeah, probably. That's probably about right.
That probably that means you're about 12 to 13%.
Yeah.
Probably natural sugar within the distillation, or
and
with
they usually get about 20% alcohol after the first distillation.
Okay.
And then the next distillation, that's what brings them up. So they're, for most mezcals, for like the traditional mezcals, the alcohol is usually between like 46 to 52%, but usually closer to like 49% is kind of the more traditional ones. They've made the 40% style for the States because that's what Americans are used to. But yeah.
Cool.
Oh, did I need to finish going through the process, or you kind of got it? So fermented, and then it's distilled. After it's fermented, then it goes into the still, and it's the traditional method is distillation with either copper pots, or clay pots, or refrescadores, which is it looks like a copper still, but it's basically a single distillation where the liquid's gone through 2 passes inside that single distillation.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then aging?
So traditional mezcals are never aged. So that would be like more of a, that would be just a stylistic choice. And I think that they're probably trying to appeal to producers or to drinkers and palates who are used to tequila that have levels of aging. From what I've tasted personally, and I love aged tequilas, I love añejos and stuff. And when the first couple mezcals I tried, I remember they were aged, and I definitely enjoy those. But if you think about the caramelization that comes from roasting mezcal in the first place, you're already getting that depth of flavor, right? There's so many different flavors going on. And I think oak to me just masks. It's like salt, right? Like you wouldn't use a lot of new oak on a good wine, right? You use neutral oak to really accent the fruit. I would say it's the same thing with mezcal. So that's personally.
That's really interesting because I didn't know that the aging. I did notice all the mezcal that I've generally seen in my life tends to be more of the blanco, silver. Sometimes it has a little bit of color, but really, really not too much. This is amazing. So what's this in our glass now? So
that is a tepestate, and it's from it's father-son team, Sergio and Luis. What was her last name? Sergio and Luis Juarez, and they're in the region San Agustin Amatengo, which is kind of near Neowatlan. So they're also doing the single distillation, which is the Refrescador. So Tepestate usually takes about 25 years to reach maturity.
Oh,
So it's one of those kind of rarer mezcals for sure, or it should be.
yeah. I mean, it's almost like you grow a grapevine to the point where it's not even going to produce anymore. And the first time you're going to let it produce, you cut the whole vine down and you shred the vine and you make wine out of it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's almost profane, the level of, I mean, there's a certain, I guess, it almost feels like a sacrifice. And I know in that region, because it's in an area of basically forest, the idea of sacrifice is actually really probably pretty important to the mythology of this area. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and where this place is, it looks kind of more like desert. It's kind of a really vast open space, but tons of agave everywhere. But that's one of the things, and that's something I felt like was important to touch on at some point. The idea of wild agaves has gotten really, really popular, and they are planting these wild varieties now and cultivating them, which should be the future if we're going to, harvest these wild agaves, because eventually they're not going to be able to reproduce. So one of the biggest differences between tequila and mezcal can be made from all these different types of agave. Blue agave, which is tequila is made from, can reproduce by taking a panca, the leaf, and sticking in the ground like any other succulent, right? You can get seeds, you can take the little bulbs, replant those. Something like Tabala, which you love, can only reproduce from seed, period. And when you go to harvest an agave for mezcal, you don't let it go to seed. Because once the quiote comes up, if you let it go to seed, that means that it's focused on reproduction. So you don't want it to focus on reproduction. You want to keep those sugars really, really high. So you cut the quiote down once it's gone up. Well, I mean, I'm sure there's a certain amount of time between once it's gone up and when they cut it, but you never let it go to seed. So that means there won't be any more Tabala eventually. So there are producers like Real Minero and La Locura in Santa Catarina, Minas, that are cultivating these varieties. And they have a little greenhouse, which I have a little video of too. I can totally show that. And they are giving agaves away to producers for free to help to make them cultivate these wild agaves so that they are not lost.
Now, how can we guarantee that if we're loving mezcal and we want to drink mezcal, how can we guarantee that instead of paying an American broker or distributor $100 for something that they're not even going to get $5 for? How do we fix this? How can we get it to a level that's sustainable, that they're getting enough money that not only can they take care of their family, take care of their community, but also be sustainable in the production of these beautiful magueys?
I would say buy mezcal from Oaxacans or buy mezcal from Mexicans, from people who are there. The laws are very challenging for small producers, and they can't always meet all the requirements, and they also can't always meet the financial requirements. But some of them have really done a good job of navigating the Mexican laws, and for some it's easier for them to sell their mezcal in the States and get a license for that than it is for them to sell their mezcal in Mexico.
Wow.
So like one of the producers I have, Tosba, he can't sell his mezcal in Mexico, but he can sell it in the States. Because I think he would need like a whole nother license for that. It's like, I don't know all the details of that, but it just seems very, very complicated.
It was interesting because I saw that after all of those bootlegging shows on A&E, like, all the like still shows, showing everyone bootlegging and down in the South, a lot of the states down there, Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, decided to make the permitting process for making hooch, for making moonshine, extraordinarily easy. And they saw an increase of almost 10,000% of the people that started making legal booze. So for me, it seems like if there could be some, combination of the producers down there getting together, and putting their, putting their pesos together to get, a political, a moment so they could maybe, show the government if they could allow them to somehow sell this a little bit with a little bit more ease, that would seemingly make it a little bit more. I want you to describe this because
isn't it insane?
So much different. Now there's a volatility to this.
Yeah.
That is almost confectionery.
Huh. Yeah.
Which is tripping me out because I've never smelled a volatile acidity coming off of cotton candy.
Huh. And it's interesting how much I think these evolve a lot because of how high the alcohol is. They do seem to change quite a bit, and even depending on glassware. To me, it's very green. Like I get tons of like herbs and brushiness and like green peppercorn, and it's extremely herbal. And I get this, I get more of like a peaty smokiness on this one than I did on the other one.
I got more smoke on the other one. I get more vinyl on this one.
Vinyl. Okay, that's actually spot on.
And I'm assuming that the fact that they're putting these in 5-gallon petrol bottles, those are probably not food grade plastic. Is there, and I've seen your pictures. A lot of people use glass carboys, and I have to think the glass carboy at a level of alcohol like this would be much more respectful.
I don't know what this guy had his in. That was Berda that had the plastic.
And no vinyl character in that whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't know what these were in. I think these actually were plastic water bottles, but I don't think that's what they were stored in. I think he had big Rubbermaid like tanks. What are those called? Barrels. Big Rubbermaid barrels.
Right.
The ones I've seen at I've seen those.
Almost like flex tanks, but no, they're just they're like what you would like put a body
olive oil in too. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, put a body in it with acid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And burn it down into small pieces. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, I read a little bit about mezcal in preparation for this, and I understand that this pulque, which is a traditionally fermented, low alcohol drink made from agave, has been drank for millennia in Mexico. It was an important part of their culture, an important part of celebration. Did the Spanish bring distillation to the New World?
I don't think so. I can share my screen again if you wanted to geek out on it more.
Absolutely.
Let's see. So if you go to this website, so they say mezcal is a pre-Hispanic drink, concludes these people in their book. They said basically this is Tlaxcala is the name of the place where these ovens and pots were found, and the ovens and pots contained traces of maguey. So they're saying that proves that there must have been distillation that was pre-imperialism.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't ever really find probably many mezcaleros that would say, "Oh yeah, the Spanish brought the stills." Most of them are going to say it's ours.
I would probably think so. And in Oaxaca specifically, so Oaxaca, the majority of the people there, Spanish is not their first language. So there's like 16 indigenous languages are spoken in Oaxaca. So and they're fiercely, loyal to their traditions. And since I guess the majority of all indigenous people in Mexico are found in Oaxaca. I think this was something from like 2011, and it was like 53% of all indigenous people in Mexico are in Oaxaca, and it was something like 1,090,000 people there.
So
yeah.
If you were to break cohorts in Oaxaca and in the Mezcalero regions, and make those cohorts and put them by their language, would those languages influence the style of mezcal they make?
God, I have no idea. That'd be a great question for Jeff. He would know more on that.
Yeah, no, and I think that would be a really fun thing to do. Where are we going next? It looks like we got a lot of tospa to taste.
Yeah, so he has a really cool story, and I think if we do Tosba, we should probably start with let's start with the Tabala.
Oh yeah. Now you're speaking my.
That's your. So he has, just one of my favorite stories. So this is so funny. His name is Edgar Gonzalez, and he's got this palenque, and it's in what would be called like low jungle in Oaxaca, and it's at an elevation of about like 6,500 feet in elevation. I gotta just show a picture of this place. It's so crazy. Totally different than anywhere else that I went to in Oaxaca. It took 6 hours to get there from Oaxaca City, and it was only like 150 kilometers away because it's all mountains.
A burro?
Yeah, practically. That's how it felt.
And again, if anyone has questions, let us know. This is fascinating.
So this is that place, and so he's replanting all these agaves. So he's cultivating agaves there. So he started with espadín being planted there. I believe he started planting espadín in like 2007, 2008. And that was when he was in the States. So he came to the States. So he wanted to be, I think, a computer engineer, and he was going to school in Oaxaca. And then he came to the States and was living in San Jose with a cousin and working in a restaurant as like a dishwasher. And he watched the movie, what's the movie with Keanu Reeves?
Place in the Sky, Cloud in
yeah, Walk in the Clouds.
Walk in the Clouds.
And he saw that movie. He didn't speak English, but he just loved like the experience of it. And they don't necessarily have a history of making mezcal in that region, because so many of the young men, mezcal is a young man's job, right? It's a lot of work. So most of the young men in these villages in, what's the name of the mountainous region? Jeremy's gonna have to say something to me. I'm totally blanking on the name of the town that he's from. San Cristobal la Roig. I can't pronounce that. But all the young men left to go to the States or to work in the cities. And so they started making rum there. That's been what they've been making there for like the last 60 years is rum. What is it? Lafroig. So there you San Cristobal Lafroig, I think. So they've been making rum there, but he had this vision. He wanted to make mezcal, and his family said, "You're crazy, go back to school, be a computer engineer. That's what you should be doing." He's like, "No, this is what I want to do." So he started sending money back to his dad and asked his dad to plant agaves with that money. And that's what he did. So he planted espadín first. And when he came back, he wanted to make mezcal, and nobody would teach him how to make mezcal. So he basically had to like go to different places and just try to pick up like knowledge. So he would definitely be considered like a new world winemaker. He does have his own way of doing things. It's still very traditional, but I would say it's innovative. Like he put solar plant panels on the roof of his palenque. Like he's very smart. He's got that kind of engineering brain, right? So the only thing I would think is a very big departure from other producers is the way he makes pechuga, which we can try later. But his pechuga is the only one that I would say is completely different. The rest is pretty much in line with how I've seen other producers make mezcal. So
the first thing that jumped out to me, and we're drinking the Tosba Tobala, savory.
Yeah.
There's some like cheddar. There's some rennet. There's like some funk to this.
See that.
I'm getting an animal character in this mezcal. Incredibly complex.
So I get green apple martini.
I get some pepper underneath that. I get the apple, but I also get, there might be something that died yesterday floating in your martini. And I love that part of it. There is a certain savory, meaty animal character to this beverage that's jumping out on me. Michelle and I have been tasting professionally together for at least a decade, if not 15 years. And I'm always amazed what she comes up with as far as descriptors tend to be the descriptors I use for the next 2 years until we talk about what you smell again. So I'm going to defer to your beautiful XX chromosome nose and olfactory lobe to give us a little bit more description of this, because this is unlike any mezcal I've ever had.
So to me, for the most part, most tobalas, which I'm sure, I've been calling it Tobala forever. But most Tobalas, I always get a green apple quality. And when I smelled this, when I poured it for you that day, it didn't smell like this. So I feel like these are always changing. Right now, I'm getting like just a perfect green apple martini on it. But I definitely get like the cheese rind thing that you talked about too. I get the funk for sure.
Yeah.
But not a bad funk. It's like
No. I mean,
like creme
anything,
fraiche too.
anything you put in a glass or on a plate that costs $100 or more, it's gonna smell like sex or ass, right? Truffles,
Yep.
Epoisse, ripe cheese,
Yeah.
it seems like if it's really damn expensive, it's going to be like, there's going to be something very unusual about its complexity. And I find, are the Tobola, if I'm saying that correctly, because I don't know if I am, are they the smallest?
I'm pretty sure they are the smallest, but I'm sure there might be something smaller, but they are one of the smallest at least. And they take about 15 years to mature, and they only reproduce from seed. So it's like like one of everybody's favorites, and it's like, oh my gosh, we could totally lose it.
Has anyone done the math? I'm sure they have, the range between Tobola and maybe the Blue Weber agave, which is freaking huge. How many magueys or how many pinas it takes to make a 750 milliliter bottle?
Oh my gosh, I'm sure. Yeah. Somebody needs to do the math on that. Jeff, do the math.
Definitely on that for sure. Let's see, what else did I said, a little bit about,
what did you think of the palate on this, by the way?
let me put it back in my mouth because I need a drink.
Because I thought this was super smooth. And I also get some buttered popcorn too on the nose for some reason.
When a wine is mature, it sings. When a wine becomes, it's round. And what I mean round, I mean it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then it keeps going.
Mm-hmm.
This, in the palate, for a spirit, I think it tells an amazing story. It tells a story of fruit. It tells a story of acidity, of mineral character, of savoriness, of spice. Yes, there is also a rich lactic character to it that persists on the palate. And it's nice. I mean, I kind of have a beginner's palate for Mezcal, so I describe it as with great love for white liquor.
Yeah.
But whether I'm using terminology that a Mezcal expert would be like, so I do have the beginner's mind.
Same here though. I'm not, nobody I was tasting, I mean, even when I was tasting with people who've been tasting Mezcal forever, I think they kind of, not that it's like, it's just a different style of communication because they might not be into wine and they're not used to talking about taste notes. It's more like, is this smooth or is it hot, or, do you like the fruity aromas? So it seems like at least the people I was tasting with, it was a little bit more simple too. So I think this, like you said, it hits all the points. Like it's like a perfect, and I love the journey it takes on the palate because it hits your tongue up front, goes all the way to the back, but it doesn't have a burn quality to it. But it's got that like that chaparral spiciness to it too. And then I get this weird almost coating on the roof of my mouth from it that reminds me of like when I just had like really fatty ice cream, like that leftover film, but in like the best way possible, if that makes sense.
Sort of a lactic viscosity.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of and I get that buttery character, and you wonder, how in the world a distillate can become viscous and rich, because but it's all about what it was distilled from. I mean, we've tasted things that have been distilled from 50 different things. That one is a winner. Where are we going next?
All right, so let's try the War Roche next. So War Roche is, wait, did Jeremy take it from me? No, it's right here. So this is at least as far, yeah, that's it. So this is also Tosba. This is a agave that he saw just on the property. It didn't match anything that he'd seen before in books. And then somebody from Oaxaca, from the academy that is, I forgot the name of it, but it's like the main academy that studies all the agaves and stuff for Mezcal. They couldn't identify it. So he called it Warash. And so it's kind of an unknown agave.
So I'm going to show everybody.
And
This
he
is
cultivated it. Sorry.
this is also a traditional mezcal drinking gourd. It is part of a organic some type of plant that produces these gourds, and then they make these beautiful sort of carvings on them. I thought it was a rabbit. It looks like a conejo.
I think it is a rabbit. Yeah.
A rabbit, and it says heavy metal, which is kind of funny because METL is another word that's used in the mezcal industry. But so
And
this,
that's an importer. He's an importer, heavy metal.
oh, it is?
Yeah. So you can follow him on Instagram.
Sweet. So I'm going to pour a little bit in this and try it out of a different vessel to see if it has any influence. Obviously, I'm tasting out of a Scotch glass, so I get a nice concentrated vapor in the chimney.
Yeah.
This it has no chimney, but for God's sake, it's mezcal. It's not that hard to smell. And it makes me work a little harder. Now this one smells a lot different. In what was this? What is this vessel called? A
Icra.
Icra.
Jicra or Jicara. So if you know Spanish, you probably know that. Yeah.
Jicama. I'm just gonna assume it rhymes with jicama.
Yeah.
And it smells grassier in
Yeah.
this.
I don't get as many pretty aromas as I did with the Tabala and the Mexicanito and even the Tepestate. It's a little bit more aggressive to me in the nose right now.
And I'm gonna put it, after tasting it traditionally, which I find very balanced, very open, very sublime. I feel like we've been drinking cabs and we've moved to Pinot, in the sense that it's not a mezcal that's going to knock you over the head. And if you're looking at the biggest, craziest mezcal, you would never put this, to me, this would be completely ruined in a cocktail.
Oh yeah. I think all of these would. Honestly, we've tried our mezcals in cocktails and they don't play well. Like they're just so volatile and fragrant and they take over. So when we do mezcal and cocktails, we use mostly tequila, and we'll do like a half ounce of mezcal just to add the smoky element. I think that if you're going to use mezcal in cocktails, it should be espadín, right?
Okay.
So
would espadín be kind of considered the most common?
yes, absolutely.
Probably the least expensive?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's like the mother there. It's more closely related to blue agave.
Okay.
It's the Americana, I think it's the species name, and blue agave is the Tequilana species, and that's the only variety left of that species. But espadín, I think, is pretty closely related from a species perspective to blue agave, and they look very similar. So when they were calling tequilas 100% agave, they were getting espadín to supplement their blue agave when there would be a blue agave shortage.
Here's a really interesting question. From a wine perspective, this is a tough question and one that I didn't set up for you, but came into my brain.
Yeah.
So many things do. If you break down the most popular 3 to 4 styles of mezcal, you see, mezcal, then you see espadín or Joven or whatever the term is. If I like big, bold wine, what should I drink? If I like moderately bold wine, maybe where should I start in mezcal? And if I want something far more delicate, elegant, and restrained, is there a style that we should probably look at?
So, well, for example, Joven is always going to be, any of these would be called Joven. So Joven just means it's not oak aged at all.
It's young.
Yeah, just young. So that's the only relevance to that term. And then you said espadín. I don't know if there's necessarily a variety context. I would say it's probably still stylistic to the producer. And it depends on if you like oak or not, right? So you might prefer mezcal that has some oak aging. And in that case, I think places like, I'm not super familiar with a lot of the brands in the States because we've basically been going to Oaxaca and getting our mezcal from there. But obviously Del Maguey he's been around forever. He does single village mezcals. So I think they're a good representation of a region and a style. For example, like the La Vida, which I personally hate. I hate that. When I thought that that's what mezcal was, I was like, I'm never drinking this. It tastes like cinder blocks to me. Tasted and smelled like cinder blocks. But he's got that's his cheapest mezcal. I guess that's a hard question. I think that most people would, any of these mezcals in the right context, if you're a wine lover, you would be able to appreciate any and all of these. One brand that I really love is Mezcal Real Minero, and that's available in the States. And they're all clay pot distilled. I'm not answering your question. I'm not sure. I think yeah.
I'm learning everything that you say.
Sorry.
Let's pivot just a second.
Okay.
The word pivot will be the word of the year in 2020.
Seriously, right?
The area of appellation where agave and maguey can be fermented and distilled and sold as official mezcal was passed in 1994 and has been the subject of great controversy ever since. What are your feelings about the areas where mezcal is mezcal and the production of mezcal too broad? Should it be more defined? Should various ideas of mezcal be redefined? Should we open it up or should we close it down?
So, God, that's such a complicated question. So in Mexico, 24 of the 31 states in Mexico have a history of producing mezcal. And only 9 of those states are recognized as denominations of origin, or DOs. What do they call them? It's the protected.
I think it's an AO. I want to see it, but it was I think it was a.
They call them NOMs, but something like that.
It's a
but there's only 9 states, and after 1994, the laws around mezcal were kind of a little bit. They were trying to refine them a little bit. So in 2017 is when they passed the different tiers of mezcal. So now you have 3 classifications for mezcal. You have mezcal, you have artisanal mezcal, and yeah, they call it mezcal artesanal. Sorry, my Spanish. And then mezcal ancestral. And it's kind of messed up because the term mezcal now can basically be applied to a mezcal that's made in the style of tequila. You can technically do like the same things. So there's a commercialization of mezcal now that has kind of diluted the term a little bit. And then ancestral mezcal, which is the traditional methods, you can only call yourself that if you use clay pots. But many of these people have a history of copper pots. So they get singled out of being able to even fit within that classification. So the only thing that they can call themselves is mezcal artisanal. And that would cover, the earthen ovens. That would cover both copper pots, clay pots, but you can also age your mezcals if you want and still be under that classification. It's just very broad and a little bit messy, but they try to please. It's like they just try to please. It's just like wine law, right? You're trying to please the big wineries like Gallo, but then also make sure that small producers get a little bit of praise, right? So it's a little bit messed up. I think one of the big things that is controversial is the use of diffusers with the term mezcal. So the idea of mezcal has always been you can use any type of agave. It's roasted in earthen ovens. It's native yeast, which they didn't mention yeast at all in this. So you could use commercial yeast, which like most tequila producers are using like champagne yeast, right? Or some type of specific wine yeast that's cultivated somewhere else. So it doesn't even touch on yeast, which it probably should. Sorry, where was I going with this? So what's my point? I'm totally forgetting.
There's some controversy over
diffusers. So diffusers basically you can take raw agave and you can extract the sugar using like hot water or sulfuric acid and take that extraction and then cook that and process that versus roasting the agave, crushing it, and then putting the fibers in, adding water and fermenting it. So that's a huge area of controversy. And it basically creates something that's more like vodka than mezcal. So That's very controversial. So
Yes. No, I think that's a perfect answer on that. After the Waresh, so which of the styles that we're drinking are like Espadine? Obviously, Joven does not have anything to do with the type of maguey, or
these are all Jovens.
they're all Jovens. Okay,
Yeah.
that's that. And then the second word, normally the Tobola, the Pachuga, Mexicanito.
So those, except for Pachuga, are all varieties.
Okay, and Pachuga.
And I'm sorry, Jeremy's yelling at me. It's Hoven, not Joven. I'm sorry, I messed that up. It's Hoven, like young. But so Pachuga would be so the names of all these, like, so you'll see on the labels, Tabala, Tepestate, Largo, Quiche. You might even see species names instead of varietal names, right? So you might see Karwinski on the label instead of like Quiche, Largo are both Karwinski varietals under that species subset, but they might just put the species name. So it's kind of more complicated than wine, because you don't see wine labels that say like Vitis vinifera, and you only see the varietal name. Whereas with Mezcal, there's at least 15 different species used to make Mezcal. And then within those species, there's dozens of varieties. And then some of these varieties are called different names depending on the region or village that you go to. So just from what we tried, like one Karwinski species, which you can get these in the States, but this one producer had like Madre Quiche, Quiche, Bi Quiche. It's like, what are all these different ones? So, but all of these have varietal names except for the Pachuga, and the Pachuga is the only one Pachuga is a style, and it's made from Espadine.
Here's an interesting question. There's a lot of people who collect German Riesling who love the fact that it's complicated because it goes beyond the ability for most Americans to understand and purchase.
Yeah.
Is there a movement in Oaxaca or in Mezcal to simplify, to take Mezcal from right now, which is probably the hottest underground spirit on the planet Earth? Do they want it to be more popular? Or do they want it to be less popular? Do we need to simplify Mezcal, or should Mezcal remain complicated so the people that love it can always love it and not have to deal with all these people, stepping over their dead grandmother to buy $100 bottles?
I think there's such a challenge. It's such a difficult product because you can only make so much and keep it good. I think so. Real Minero, these guys, these are considered to be like one of the biggest producers of Mezcal, and they make all of 5,000 bottles a year. And they're considered to be like a bigger producer. They have a great business model, and their Mezcals are all six figures, I think, for the most part in the States. But they are Mexican owned by them, and they're on they are focused on sustainability. But they were able to build the first library in their town, the first public library. So it's helping these people to be able to advance in society, like Sergio and Luis, who have the Gozona Mezcal that we tried earlier, the Tepestate. He used to work, he's been to the States multiple times. He used to work in Oxnard in construction. His family's always had a history of making Mezcal. Now he doesn't have to come to the States anymore. He can stay in Oaxaca and make Mezcal for his family for a living and make money and prosper. And this has been something that his family's been doing forever. So now they can actually make a living out of it. But the challenge is the cultivation of so many wild agave and the abuse of it, right? So if we take all of the wild agave and we're so focused on single varietal agaves now, that's kind of been part of the marketing in order to market it better and to explain it better, because it's more like wine in that regard. But that's been one of the challenges. So I think if they can get the sustainability down right, I think it will always need to be an expensive product because of how long it takes these agaves to mature.
Now, are there people just sending kids into the mountains to pick every like maguey up there? I mean, I just can imagine that there has to be such a limited resource to make something that's such a valuable resource in the community.
Yeah, I'm sure there's ownership of certain areas, and I don't think people are leaving their own community and going to somebody else's community and going to the hills and harvesting agave.
Is
And
it is there like a maguey mafia? Like, are there people that go and self-moderate who's picking the agave? Like, if you are from Michoacan and you're caught in Oaxaca picking Tobola, are you going to get your ass kicked? I mean, are you
that'd
going
be a good question for Jeff. That makes sense to me.
Sure. Let's pour another mezcal in our glass, and then I'm going to bring Jeff in.
Okay. So let's do the pechuga. Oh wait, should we taste your Tabala? We
Sure.
should taste your Tabala.
Let's do it.
So yours is like bright green apple to me right now.
Okay, so this was the mezcal that basically caused this show, because when Jeff brought me this mezcal, we had done some tastings, Michelle, but this I guess it would be Patrocinio Reyes Diaz, Yokua San Idelfoso Sola de Vega. So I'm trying to figure out how to bring Jeff in. All right, Jeff, we're gonna try to figure this out here.
Remember you made me a host, and then
I was trying to get, maybe he's there. Hope. Let's see. Attendees, panelists. Okay, attendees. Now, got that button. Not exactly sure. Let's while I'm waiting to figure it out, let's taste this Tobola and see what you think about it.
yeah.
And then the final question I had was, there's a strong feeling in the mezcal community that the industry is under pressure to become industrial, like tequila in Jalisco. Can you speak to the differences in the two beverages and how mezcal? Is there a way that mezcal can maintain its craft presence?
Well, I think the fact that the mezcal its time of arrival is now, I think, is key. Tequila is kind of, peak was, what was that? Like when people really started sipping on, tequila in the States has been around for a while. But the fact that mezcal is coming into fashion during the time of craft everything, I think that will help a lot. I think people are focused on authenticity. They're focused on a place of origin that still has meaning. So I don't think people are going to reward those industrial producers as much. I think that you might see them in the wells of bars more, because those might be used for mixed drinks and stuff, which that's great. I think that you don't want to put even an espadine necessarily, that small batch, in a cocktail. I think it just kind of wastes the point of it. So I think the time for mezcal being right now, I think, is key. So
nice.
I hope not. There's definitely some industrial mezcals are out there already. They're already out there, but
I'm finding it so interesting because before I had context, this was my sort of mezcal that gave me like what I loved about mezcal, and now I'm smelling it. It smells volatile. And all these other ones have shown so many other pretty edges to them. I'm finding that this Tobola, it's a wild Tobola, and it's got a beautiful label, and you guys can.
Yeah.
And this was given to me by Jeff. Jeff might be taking care of his kids or his wife. I've been doing everything I can to try to bring him on. I'm just not being offered the opportunity to, which I'm not exactly sure why. But in the end, oh wait, no, that's not it either.
Oh, he says I'm here.
Okay.
He says I'm here.
Okay, let's see what I can do. Talk to me about this mezcal, and I'll see what I can do about getting him on.
I can't hear you, Jeremy. So when I first poured this into the glass, and when I had it in this little tiny vial, and I think that's what's so fascinating about mezcal too, is that high alcohol, the aromas are so fleeting, right? What you keep saying to me? I can't hear you. Jeremy keeps yelling at me in the other room and I can't hear anything he's saying. But when I first smelled it in the vial, I got this same straight candied green apple thing going on. And now that I have it in the glass, it's definitely started to change. I get a little bit more volatility on it. I do get a little bit of vinyl on it too.
Sorry, I was just saying, make sure you had time to talk about the chew that.
Oh, okay. All right, sorry. But I think it's very smooth. Very, very smooth.
It's starting to show. I mean, I guess you never understand. You know, I think it was Henri Jayer who said about wine, the fundamental problem with tasting a wine is that when I put one wine in front of you, the fundamental question is, do you love it?
Mm-hmm.
If I put two wines in front of you, what does the fundamental question become?
Which one?
That's it.
Right?
Everyone deserves, every mezcal deserves a moment for it to be its own thing. And I've lost my ability to love this mezcal the way I used to love this mezcal because you've shown me so many other things. I keep going back to the Mexicano.
The Mexicanito?
Oh my gosh.
So
I
pretty.
can't stop thinking about it. It's like
Oh, I get cotton candy on that one now too.
it's like the redhead who treated me bad. No, it's just it is absolutely gorgeous. All right, so let's
floral too. But I like this. I get a really pretty spiciness from this Tobala on the palate too. I love there's more of an upfront spiciness and it's very smooth. I mean, do you know what the alcohol is on it? It might not say though.
It's not actually listed. My guess is it's somewhere around 90 proof.
Okay, so 45. Okay.
45. That's just my palate.
Mm-hmm.
And I apologize, Jeff. I'm seemingly trying to figure out. Let me try something. I'm going to actually stop recording and see maybe if that gives me the opportunity to do that.
Jeff, can I try something on my side and see if it makes?
Oh yeah, no, that's right. I made you the
Jeff
I think I made you the goddess of
there we go.
Of all things.
Unmute.
Let's see.
Hey,
I hear you. Can I?
What do I do here?
I can definitely hear you, and you are up in Washington, correct?
Yes. Oh, it says I can't start video because the host has disabled it. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. And we're going to be enabling you to direct
video. You can see what I'm tasting here alongside you all.
Please.
Unfortunately, I'm out of that Tobala, but I'm interested in what you just said about how it tastes in comparison to what you have been tasting.
Hey, Jeff, I'm going to make you a host and hopefully that'll fix it.
Okay. Is there anything I need to do?
You should be able to turn your video on now.
Let's see.
Yeah, baby.
Yay.
Oh my God, I'm there.
What's happening? Talk to us about.
I forgot I'm sporting my what do you call it? My lockdown hair, right?
Yeah, no, you're a little more Colonel Sanders.
Let's see if we can get some cups and some bottles in here.
Yes.
I got my jicaras.
Yes, thank you for pronouncing it properly.
Jicara.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I've been enjoying an Espadín by Manuel Aragon. That's what I started with here. That comes from just up the road, up the creek from where Patrocinio is. That's the Tobala you're having. And the interesting thing, it's an Espadín that I love that has this really interesting mineral kind of flavor to it. Ooh. The only other place I'd noticed that was actually in Patrocinio's Mezcal, not in that Tobala. That Tobala is kind of a what do you call it? A masterwork for him. I would call it, like they'll say sometimes it's their obra maestra, you know. It's kind of a reference Tobala for Sola de Vega Tobala. I mean, to me, having had many of these Tobalas, I would say that one kind of like has everything. It's like right in the middle of everything that's great. you would know how to compare it to a wine. Like if you went to a wine region and somebody is making the perfect varietal, the perfect example of what the reference varietal for everybody else. That's what I call that Toblerone. So it's interesting how it's coming across to you. Wes, were you tasting raspa in that when you said it tasted hot to you?
It was tasting it just was a little more volatile, because I remember showing this to people, because you left me with about a half of a 375, and you can see it's down to about right there, because I promised my friend Tim Vandergrift up in British Columbia that he would taste it before he died. To me, this was my seminal Mezcal. It took me from I like Mezcal to holy crap, what's going on with this? I want to take a lifelong journey through Oaxaca and all the other regions that create this. I found it in context with all the other mezcals we tasted tonight. It was a little more volatile and a little more intense in the nose, and I didn't find it as compelling in the nose after going through all of these. But I think what I'm finding is I'm gaining context and understanding my mezcal palate. It still is one of my favorite mezcals on the planet Earth, but it is incredibly special.
Yeah, there's interesting things about it. It looks to me like most of what you're tasting are copper still mezcals. Is that right?
Except for the Real Minero Tabala.
Okay, and Real Minero is they're not copper still, but they're not doing it in the same way like Patrocinio is, right? I mean, he is old school, tiny batch traditional.
Well, I mean, they're small batch, but I mean, in comparison to these tiny producers, for sure. I mean, they're making 5,000 bottles a year.
Yeah, but they have, I guess, what you'd call it. They have a bigger operation.
Well, yeah.
But in any event, that could be one of the big differences, right? The copper still mezcals tend to have those upfront, flash in the front of the mouth flavors, bolder, maybe the way kind of what I call fruit forward, high alcohol wines, hit you in the front of the palate, and then they kind of don't really linger too much. And the clay pot stills, often have this more subtle kind of flavor that lingers on the back of the gums more. I also find, that's kind of how I categorize the two basic flavors of what I think are great mezcals. Or let's call it three basic flavors. One is what I call not great mezcal, which I won't drink. And that's, is there raspa right here at the bottom of the throat? If there's a raspa, that to me is usually a sign of a single distillation, or they have blended back in, which a lot of great old school mezcaleros do. They've blended back in the puntas and the bad alcohols rather than just using water to bring it down.
Is punta the word for cut? Is that a cut in the distillation?
You have the puntas and the colas. So the puntas is kind of the first 20 to 25%. And that is, starts off
heads
with
and tails.
Heads and tails.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the puntas, are methyl alcohols. So they'll kill you.
They won't kill you.
It's funny when you show up at a palenque. When you show up at a palenque, it's funny because one of the first things a lot of them will do is be like, are you a real man? Here, have some of the punta.
Oh.
Straight methyl alcohol.
You walk away freaking blind.
Exactly. Any event, right? So they take those out, they separate those, and then the colas, right, is the tail end, kind of the bottom, maybe 30 to 35%, right? And the question is, what do you do when you've got that so-called cuerpo, which then gets, distilled a second time to bring your second piece of the cuerpo, and your really good mezcal comes out at about, 60, 65%. How do you bring it down? Well, a lot of them will add back in some of these bad alcohols to either bring it down or up from whatever they've ended with. And so you get this raspa. Anyway, however you get the raspa, to me, that one I usually cut off. So the two profiles I look for, which I associate with copper stills and clay pot stills, and also regions, the manner of harvest. The usual manner of harvest is to pick at the peak of, so they'll go in the field when the quiote comes up, whenever that happens. They'll go cut off the quiote, but then you have to come back later, which brings on a kind of an interesting question, Wes, about what you asked, how this all works, out in the campo with all this agave out there. It's kind of an amazing system. in that, you know, someone goes out and cuts off the quiote and there's a ripe maguey that might have been growing for 20 years. And there it is. Now it's ready to make mezcal. Why doesn't anybody steal it? They just don't. They don't do that. It's an interesting thing. So they cut off the quiote. They come back like 3 months later or something like that. That's the peak of the sugars.
So
And
once
I also,
once you've cut off the flower, you've basically claimed it. So you would never harvest a pina that had been deflowered. So once you've deflowered,
yes, it's different in different regions. So it's different in different regions. You know, some of these regions are totally communal, and they just kind of split up. You know, historically, my family was up on that side of the hill. Your family's up on that side of the hill.
That's cool.
You know, in other regions, they're actually cultivating. You know, so they've got, you know, delineated fields, and you know, there's the ejido land system, which plays into it, because in the ejido, if you let your land go, then you lose it. And a lot of times, you know, because, for example, the kids have left to go to the States to work or something, there's nobody to work the field for corn or whatever you might have done. So, you know, mezcal people have come in and said, hey, let me plant some maguey on your ejido. That'll help you claim it. It'll be claimed for you for the next 20 years, right? Because that's how long some of this maguey is going to go. So then it's, you know, that belongs to whoever has made that arrangement. But it's interesting to me when I've been out in the campo sometimes and I've seen, you know, these cut off quiotes, and I'm like, you know, why wouldn't someone grab that?
Yeah.
And they just kind of look at me like, no, we wouldn't do that. And I said, well, how would anyone know? And they said, oh, we'll know.
Yeah.
The
Somebody's
small
watching.
towns.
muy Americano. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, I'd love for you to take us through maybe one or two of your favorite mezcals in front of you. And one of the last questions, and I'd like to kind of close up in about 10 minutes, and I was going to ask Michelle and then ask Jeff. After Jeff gives us a couple of comments about his favorite mezcals and styles and areas that are producing sort of the secrets from Jeff's perspective, I want couple minutes from Michelle on the perfect day in Oaxaca. And then I want a couple minutes from Jeff on the perfect day in Oaxaca.
Okay.
Okay. You know, I'll use two of these right here as my example, because they go into those two kind of basic flavor profiles that I talk about. So this first one, this comes from San Juan del Rio. Can anybody see the label there?
Yeah, destilado.
My labels, right? So what I do is I take my bottles down to the palenques. When I go mezcaloring, I go straight to the palenque and I bring cases of empty bottles and I bottle it right on the spot. I think it's very important to get into glass as quickly as you can. Especially with, you know, a lot of them, they have what they call these aged plastic garrafones, and they're pretty neutral. But if anybody's got like new garrafones, it really will it'll ruin the mezcal, you know, if they put it in there. So the sooner you get it in glass, the better. So I put it right in the glass, and then I put these labels on it later. That's why all my labels look the same. These are all from different palenques. So this is from Rodolfo Juan Juarez. He actually is someone you can buy down if you get Espadín from San Juan del Rio. The maker is Rodolfo Juan Juarez. He is young guy, one of the great mezcal makers of Oaxaca, Copper Still in San Juan del Rio. And this is the Especial Yerba Fina. So this is his Espadín, which you can buy in the store, made by Ali Poo. And he takes this on the second distillation and he puts into the condenser 1.5 kilos of a finely trimmed herb that we're all familiar with, that also grows in Santa Barbara, that they get from a nearby village. And that, you know, imparts a whole kind of flavor and level of other things and deliciousness to this. Now, his mezcals are done copper still. He uses a shredder, a machine shredder now, instead of the millstone mash.
Mm-hmm.
He cooks in green oak, which is usually the best way to cook to get that kind of smoky flavor. He swears by the shredder now, which, you know, the state of Oaxaca went around and gave all these mezcaleros shredders about 10 years ago. And a lot of them didn't use them, and a lot of them do. He decided he likes the shredder over, you know, the horse and stone method. because he's making a little bit larger production now, and he can get everything into fermentation the same day. And you know how that works from winemaking, right? So if you're using the horse method, you might take 2 or 3 days to get everything into fermentation, which means your first stuff is fermenting at a different place than your last stuff. That adds a level of delicious complexity to a whole bunch of mezcals that I love, but it's not great for someone who's trying to come out with something, more intentionally.
Crisp and fresh.
Or you mean consistent too?
Yeah. So in any event, this and his mezcals generally are great examples of what I call this copper still profile, harvested at the peak of sugars. That tends to be just the flavor of the maguey, and it massively hits the front of your mouth and your whole palate. And then it goes down nice and clean. Doesn't really linger. In this case, has a really delicious herbal scent that comes from it. It's comparable to the pechuga that you were talking about. That's what an especial is. It's where they put something like, the turkey breast or a mix of fruits and herbs or these kinds of herbs into the condenser and end up with an influence in the flavor. Same way gin would be made.
Okay.
Putting juniper into the condenser, right? And actually some people are making mezcal gin. So let's compare that to the other flavor profile. This is a wild papalome. Let's see if I can get that into the screen. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a wild papalome. That's like a sister to Tobala. And in the Mixteca, they will call it, some of them will say, look, it's just the Mixtec word for Tobala. It's the same thing. I don't think it is. It looks slightly different. The papalome tends to have broader, slightly paler leaves and is a slightly larger plant than the Tobalas tend to be. But, anyway, they're very similar looking. This comes from Ixcatlan, and you've probably heard of this, Michelle, the Ixcatlan leather fermented mezcals.
No.
These are pretty prized and pretty unusual. One of the big differences between someone like Rodolfo Juan and the copper still is that with a copper still, you can make a batch of 200 or 300 liters pretty easily, and you can do 1,000 to 2,000 liters a month with 2 copper stills, and working through the day. When you're doing clay pot still, it's a much longer, more difficult small batch process, and getting a 200-liter batch out of a clay pot still is a whole other order of business. So this is one of the differences in that denomination thing you were talking about between ancestral and artisanal.
Yeah.
The ancestral guys, they protested to being grouped with the people with the copper stills, because to them they said those guys have a total cost advantage on us. I mean, we're making tiny batches and it takes us a ton of work, and they're making batches 5 times as big and half the work.
But it's not always that much bigger. From what I've seen with the still, they're still pretty small. So it is sad that they don't have their own grouping. And one point I just feel like is so important. I feel like there is, and I guess somebody who is a chemical engineer would be able to tell us. I have a hard time seeing. I feel like fermentation is super important, right? Fermentation, the type of water you're using to add to the fibers is so important. That's why Santa Catarina Minas mezcals are so good, because they have a really amazing water supply too. But when you're distilling something and it's clay versus copper, I just don't see there being such a difference in the end product. And I mean, I've tasted, and I definitely can tell the mineral element that you're talking about, but part of me also wonders if that's the water in Santa Catarina Minas, because that's where I was tasting the clay distillates or mezcal.
Well, Santa Catarina is a tough comparison, because they are typically, and that Real Minero is a little bit different, because again, they're one of the kind of leading industry people in a way. But they are, for example, their traditional method there is to blend the colas and the puntas back in. And you get these generally hot mezcals that are kind of interesting. It's different than someone like this one I'm drinking right now,
Yeah.
which
But
is
they're not my
a
only reference. That's what I'm saying. I've tasted others from
right. Yeah. Well, one time when you come to Oaxaca, I've done before, because I've got such a giant collection at this point. I can do all kinds of different kinds of tastings of how we split things apart. And sometimes I do tastings where we just compare, similar varieties from copper still production and clay pot still production, which have a lot of differences.
Yeah.
But I think when you do that, I think most of us that when we've had those tastings, we tend to say, all the mezcals are unique, but we tend to say, wait a minute, you end up being able to kind of tell something between the copper still ones and the clay pot still ones. And it's a hard quality to describe.
I think that's 100% spot on, but if you didn't have a perfect measure, so in each of these villages, they're all doing, one village, everybody's doing copper, everybody's doing clay, and they're getting the varieties from a similar area or vicinity, right? We don't have a perfect measure of like, okay, here is let's just say Tabala from this place, and let's do it in copper and let's do it in clay in the same day or same type of time period using the same water, same, it's like same ambient yeast, all that. I don't think we have a perfect measure to compare the two.
Yeah, well, yeah, you generally will not. Interesting, I do have that with a friend of mine named Tony Robb. So he's a gringo there in San Pablo Etla, and he has a clay pot still and a copper still, and he's got 40 hectares of maguey he's been growing for many years.
Yeah.
So he does these side by sides where he distills some of the very same fermented maguey in the clay pot and some of it in the copper still.
See, that would be a totally different experience.
But that's but what also there's so many things that go into it.
Yeah.
But there is anyway, I want to get to this delicious thing because I just tasted it. It is so delicious.
Wes disappeared.
Oh, is Wes? He took a bathroom break?
No, his actual camera disappeared.
Uh-oh.
We're kind of on our own here. I'm not sure what's going on, but go ahead.
Well, so this, if you go up to Ixcatlan, they have almost their main maguey, pretty much the only maguey is Papalome. Almost nothing grows up there. And Papalome, of course, is such a fantastic rare maguey that we all want, that, it's worth this long trip.
Right.
They make it in this crazy ancestral method that takes about a month of solid work to produce 30, 40 liters. Because they're going out on, their mules to get the magueys.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're coming in, they're doing the roasting, and then they're hand mashing it. So it takes 3 days to do the hand mash, and then they're running the fermentation and then sitting there by the clay pot still. So it's this kind of ridiculous process, but it ends up with such a fantastic mezcal in some of the palenques. And this particular palenque, I have mezcals from 2 or 3 makers out of this same palenque, which is kind of on the other side of town.
Mm-hmm.
And they all just tend to be absolutely fantastic with this kind of smooth, subtle flavor. So unlike that kind of upfront thing I was describing, this comes in very subtle, smooth, and lingers on the back of the gums and stays there for like a half hour. It's really amazing.
Yeah. He said he got kicked out, and so I'm gonna try to get him back in. I don't know if I just sent him the link.
So I don't know if it's the leather fermentation or what it is. I think this particular mezcal or that palenque, because it's on the other side of the village, it has a different native yeast than is in the other 3 or 4 palenques that are on one creek. And so it has this different flavor profile.
Yeah. Well, especially with the creek there, it's changing. The yeast is going to be different because of that creek too, right?
Right, exactly. And so all the palenques that are along that creek, there's like 4 palenques along that little creek, have a similar flavor profile that is distinct from the mezcals that come out of this palenque that's across the other side of town.
Yeah.
I got to attribute that to the yeast because, there's really nothing else different. They're doing it, the same method otherwise, and it's basically the same magueys.
Yeah.
But so what they do when they harvest there, so they go and they cut the quiote and they wait about a year.
Yeah.
And they come back and they harvest little shriveled up brown piñas.
I thought waiting about a year was pretty traditional. That's what I was told. After you cut the
No. Well, I mean,
at least a few people, that's what they told me, is they wait about a year after they cut it.
In the Mixteca, in the southern and eastern regions, they tend to do, and places where they do the copper stills, they tend to do it about 3-4 months out when it's at the peak sugar.
Mm-hmm.
If you go a year out like this, it's a dry, shriveled up little thing, and I would think all the sugars are all gone. Wes could probably speak a little more to that. I mean, there can't be a lot of sugars left, but that's anyway what they do.
That concentrates the sugars. that was my understanding, is that when you cut the quiote, it keeps the energy focused on the piña or in the heart, and then you concentrate. That's what they told me, is once you cut the quiote and you let it sit for some period of time. They told me it was usually about a year, or when they can get to it, basically. But it concentrates the sugars. That was my understanding.
Yeah, so this is what I've noticed in these two flavor profiles I'm talking about. And of course it's just anecdotal, I don't have any evidence, but when I have these Mixteca or other magueys where they have harvested these shriveled piñas, and they're usually using clay pot production in those areas, I get sometimes this kind of flavor profile with this very subtle, very delicate, sweet notes that linger in the back and are just very clean and very light and delicate across the tongue. Whereas when I have these copper still and sometimes clay pot stills that are harvested at the peak sugars 3-4 months out, I get this profile, that is, explosive in the mouth, which I think is the one we're more used to. Pretty much all of the ones that are, imported to the States, I think fit that kind of profile. I haven't seen this other profile in imported bottles.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's it's one of those things, one of the many details that makes so much difference in the flavors that we ultimately get.
And they're always changing for me, and I don't know if it's because of the high alcohol, but I regularly taste through the mezcals, and I take tasting notes when I taste them originally, and then when I bring them home. And when I visited Oaxaca before too, I purchased glass to take my bottles. On my last trip, it made more sense to just use water bottles because they're lighter and I could bring back more. And then when I got home, I put them in glass. So, but I just think that they change a lot more as far as the spirit because of that high alcohol. And like, for example, the Tobala that Wes gave me from the one that you gave him, when I smelled this, when he first gave it to me and he put it in this container, it had a totally different profile on Wednesday when he dropped it off than when I first opened it. And as soon as I opened it, I got this just bright candied green apple. And then when I put that in the glass, it started to evolve and it got more of like a vinyl and more of a smoky quality to it too. So I just think that these, I'm just wondering if it's because of the high alcohol, if these just esters are just constantly changing too.
Yeah, I wonder about that because people, so many mezcaleros producers, right? They swear, oh, once it's in the bottle, nothing changes. But I've noticed real evolution in bottles that I've bottled up. I mean, over the years, and it's always hard to say. Are you imagining that? Because something you tasted, 5 years ago, and now you open it and you're like, that's not how I remember it. Well, do I really remember it? I mean, it was 5 years ago. I don't know. Right. What you just did there with that, I mean, I've always also thought about the oxidation. So if it's in something where you've got a little bit in a big bottle, so there's a lot of air in there, what does that do to it? And I don't know. I've had people who purport to know say that, well, there's so much alcohol, it shouldn't change, but it does change. It does.
Well,
I mean, what you notice.
There's a certain level where there's fleeting esters, right? So there's a volatility once you get beyond 46%, right, where the esters are always changing and fleeting. And I do think that there's, I don't know if it's oxidation per se, because I think the alcohol is too high for oxidation, but there is going to be, I think, a change when you go from a bottle that has, you know, this much in it, right? It's down to here, to a bottle that has this much in it. You're going to get less headspace, and you're going to get, I think that when you have a fuller bottle, the esters are going to be tighter. They're not going to be so fleeting. And then when you have this bottle it's just like it's last breath, right? And people can totally probably correct us if they're wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that's kind of what's going on too.
Yeah, I mean, something's going on because even though, yeah, like you said, people, you know, scientifically in the know
Yeah.
purport to say otherwise, we taste the differences. We
Yeah.
taste those changes.
And there's evaporation, right? I mean, obviously not in glass per se, but you know, when you're opening the bottle and whatnot. In Oaxaca, most people are using the carboys with a corn cob shoved inside of it for the seal too. So I'm sure there's some evaporation, that angel share that's going on with that. I think we might have lost Wes. So,
Yeah, he texted, I think we've lost him.
yeah. So do you want to describe your perfect day in Oaxaca?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. That's a tough ask, you know.
Maybe why do you love Oaxaca?
Especially now when I can't get back.
Yeah.
You know, the airport's closed and everything's locked down, and I can't actually get back. The house and all my mezcal is, you know, sitting there waiting for a return with no luck. But yeah, perfect day. I mean, what I love to do is mezcaloring. That's what I do for fun. And, you know, so that means we go out to different parts of Oaxaca, usually with one of my mezcaloring friends or anybody who is visiting and wants to go along. And we look for the maguey, or we chase down rumors we've heard, and, you know, get out to these different villages and, you know, ask who's making mezcal, and then, you know, show up and go taste it. And over time, you know, over 10 years now, yeah, I've probably been to somewhere between 100 and 200 palenques and met a extraordinary number of these old school, you know, the dying generation, like Patrocinio. You know, he was 74 when I met him in, I want to say 2014, 2013, and he's been 74 every year since.
Yeah.
So who knows
Right.
how long he's been 74. He's looking older. This one I'm drinking, Manuel Aragon. He stopped making mezcal this year at 82 years old. This Tobali Festival from Marcelo Fugencio Reyes, probably he calls it his masterpiece of 80 years. He calls 80 years of making mezcal. I guess really 60 years. Let's be real. He's 82. He won't be making it much longer, but it's a Tobali. That's a Javali and Tobala ensemble that he made for the town festival this year in January. I'm sorry, 2019 in January. And I happened to be there when the heart of it was coming out. That is when it's coming out of the still at 50%.
Yeah.
That's the very, very best stuff. If you can get it, you know, that's the real cuerpo, right at 50%. And, you know, so a perfect day to me is, you know, you get out to that beautiful campo and you just start asking around, and you run into, you know, one of these masters, you know, that nobody knows. And they open up their old treasure house of these mezcals, and they've got them, you know, some in glass, mostly in those old plastic garrafones. And you start tasting it and you go, these are masterpieces. This is amazing. And, you know, and then you find yourself, you know, after, because of course they're serving you cups like this full,
Yeah.
one
Right.
after the other. And then, yeah, you find yourself with a good buzz on, and, you know, night falls and you're out in the campo in Oaxaca. It's pretty sweet.
Ah, I love it. Well, I feel like Oaxaca is one of the most magical places I've ever been to. We've been 3 times, but we've visited probably about 15 palenques because we really would pack our trips. And my Spanish is terrible, but I try, and everybody is so just, they squeeze you, they hug you, they give you all the love in another language. And that to me is Oaxaca. I feel like people really, they're patient, and they're compassionate and very human too. So I can't wait to go back. We were just there in December, and just had the most incredible trip. And I have to show at least a couple things on my screen here. I would say my perfect day in Oaxaca would be to start at the market and get one of those flor de calabaza quesadillas that they have. And they're cooking them on the big clay comals on the open flame, and then they open it up. Or, you know, they put the tortilla on there and they fill it with cheese, and they fill it with the zucchini flowers, which is the flor de calabaza. And then they cover it up, and then you get the big hot quesadilla, and you just fill it with like the best salsa you've ever had. And that's
yeah.
like, I could go without eggs for the rest of my life.
You're making me hungry.
And then I would go to a palenque, and we, you know, like I said, my Spanish is terrible. Well, I try. I mean, I have some vocabulary, but my pronunciation is terrible. And since Spanish is not like the first language for most people in Oaxaca, it's even harder for them to understand me as a total gringo trying to speak Spanish. So we've used Experience Mezcal or Experience Agave now for our trips, and Dari has been our tour guide. He grew up in Oaxaca, and he knows all the little towns. He did grow up in Miahuatlan, so I'm familiar with more of those single distillates from a couple trips, and I really enjoyed them personally. But he's just a wealth of knowledge, and he's super open to all types of mezcal, and he's just excited to take you to different places every time you go. So I really enjoyed that. And then I would say sunset, and I have to share my screen here. Sunset in front of Santo Domingo Church, having a cocktail at one of those rooftop bars to finish the day. Even though you wouldn't want to eat there, sit at a rooftop bar. And I just have to show this because it's pretty, just a stunning place. Let's see. Perfect day. Well, first of all, this was the flor de calabaza. Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's the bomb. I mean, that's a big part of you know, a great mezcaloring day, when you get, you know, far out in one of these villages where, you know, you're not going back to Oaxaca that night. You've got to stay there. And the food is going to be that, right? It's going to be simple. It's going to be, there's going to be a pot of beans. Might be some quesillo. There'll be some fantastic tortillas that are fresh made from the local corn, and the flavors are amazing, even though it's, you know, as simple as can be, just the herbs, the salsa, etc. And you have that after a day of, yeah, there it is, Oaxaca. You have that after a day of great mezcal, and you know, the stars come out, and you can see all the stars out there, and
like,
it's
I mean,
wonderful.
it's just stunning. It's just, and there's so much art, right? It's just so many colors. That's just everywhere on the streets. Is just art. I mean, I've never seen such artistic people. Do you know this guy, the older guy in the center? This guy?
Well, yeah. Wait, that's not Toledo, is it?
I don't remember his name. I thought this was from our first trip. He just made a Monero. That's all he labeled was it for his mezcal was Monero. Have you met him?
He looks very familiar. Yeah, it's not who I thought. Yeah, he looks very familiar, but no, I don't. And yeah, he looks very familiar, but no, I can't place him.
Huh. Yeah. Anyway.
Is he the father? Is he the father of Real Monero?
No, not at all. He's a different village, but near there. And I have my notes from somewhere else, but I didn't save them for this because I was just pulling up because I just wondered if you knew him because he's been around forever, and yeah, he was a funny guy from our first trip. So we've fallen in love with Oaxaca and the people, and we just keep trying to learn as much as possible about mezcal. And
you could spend you know, a couple little things about some of the topics you touched on. I mean, one is you talked about how we're in such a great time.
Yeah.
You know, it's just coincidentally that I discovered mezcal, good mezcal, around 2010.
Mm-hmm.
And you're about the same time frame, right? 2014, 15, something?
2017, actually.
Okay.
It was brand new. And it was because I went to Guadalajara for a assignment about tequila. And when I started looking into tequila, I realized that there was just a lot of, the artisan tequila had kind of been a little bit lost. And so I wanted to seek out these small producers of tequila, and I wasn't able to find them. And I found a little mezcaleria in downtown Guadalajara that was selling agave distillate, because it was agave distillate made in a mezcal style from blue agave, but they couldn't call it mezcal. And so that was my first introduction. And then I just started reading up about it. And that was January 2017. So then March 2017, we went to Oaxaca, and then we went back for a Dia de los Muertos with a bunch of friends just to learn more. And then we just went back again in December this last year.
So we're at a really interesting time.
Yeah.
In 2010, so if you talk to the guys who do the Single Villages mezcal, what do they call their brand again? I'm spacing.
Del Maguey?
Yeah, Del Maguey, for example, or Doug French, who does Scorpion. So they started around the same time in the 90s.
Uh-huh.
And they have a lot of responsibility for the way mezcal has grown as a category.
Absolutely.
And commercially. And, they'll both tell you that, it was hard to find good mezcal in the village.
Huh.
In the 90s. It was single distillate. It was, the raspa, the big burn. Yeah. And it was, there was a lot of pretty rough stuff. And when I started mezcaloring, by 2010, because, this had already kind of happened, if someone made really good mezcal, one of these old mezcaleros who knows how to make it, if they made really good mezcal, all of a sudden they can sell it.
Yeah.
Whereas, they couldn't 10 or 15 years ago. It was just in the village, and it was just going to be whatever they made for a little extra pocket change.
Yeah.
But by 2010, there's somebody who's going to pop into the village like me.
Yeah.
Or, one of these young folks from Mexico City who are starting up, these small brands.
Yeah.
And is going to go buy it all up. So at that time, you had this explosion of good, really good mezcal. Really, the quality kind of exploded. And I think a lot of people have said the same thing. And as this industry has, the category has risen, that's kind of come around, it's become even kind of bigger. People are producing more varietals, and they're really getting into it, and people are more and more excited about it. But what you're seeing happen is what happened in Jalisco,
Mm-hmm.
which is, all of a sudden, right, big money comes into it and goes, well, how do we make money?
Right.
We can't, produce 30-liter batches and put marketing money behind that and make any money. So those old artisanal guys are dead, right? Meanwhile, there's a huge demand for maguey, and the price is going up. And so the example of this is Rodolfo Juan, whose mezcal I'm drinking right here in San Juan del Rio. When I first met him in 2010, this is a pure mezcal town. I mean, you know how in Oaxaca, all the villages specialize in different things,
Mm-hmm.
pots or clay or weaving or mezcal. So this is a pure mezcal town, right? And when I was there, there's 3,000 people down in this town. They communally grow all their maguey. And Rodolfo Juan was just starting to make a little bit of mezcal in his father's palenque. And he had just harvested a tepestate his grandfather had planted for him. So it was a 25 or 30-year-old tepestate. And that was really what turned me on to great mezcal.
Totally.
There were 70 palenques operating in that town in 2010.
Yeah.
If you go there today, there are 4 palenques. Most of those great mezcaleros I know are working for Rodolfo Juan. Last time I was there, I was like, what are you guys doing here?
Yeah.
I said, we're working. What about your palenque? Well, what's happened is, he's got a contract with Alipu.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's got more and more production to do. The price of the maguey shot through the roof. And so if you're a small palenque traditional producer now, well, you can, and if you have maguey, you can sell it for more than you'll be able to sell the mezcal for. So you're going to sell the maguey. And if you don't have maguey, you can't afford to buy it. So all of these palenques now, this
Unless you're
variety are
cultivating it
starting
yourself, right?
in
Like,
that region to shut down.
yeah.
So it's a really interesting time we're in right now, and all these questions I think are very relevant to what's going to happen with mezcal.
Yeah.
Are we going to stick with this kind of really detailed labeling so that we as consumers can try and pick out these bottles? And is there even any hope, in that model? I mean, how much mezcal do we really buy?
Well, I
Right?
would like to say that we focus on buying mezcal from Mexicans. Like, seriously, like trying to focus on buying the mezcals in the States that are from Mexican producers that are coming here. That would be, I think, a start.
Yeah. So there's, and like I know in Sola de Vega, a young guy I know, Fidel Reyes, makes fantastic mezcal. His Palenque has a very unique natural, the yeast profile, so that he has a slightly different profile to all his mezcals from his neighbors. Makes great varietals, does a great job, and he is trying to market a brand with about 12 or 15 other producers from around Sola de Vega they call Rajabules. And so that's what they're trying to do. And that is one of the possibilities. But he's having a tough time.
Well, there's a lot of
And
red
it's
tape,
always,
so that's part of it.
yeah. So that's one of the things is we're at this kind of golden age right now, and let's just hope it continues. The wine comparison might be kind of what you see now. It's kind of interesting, right? Now people are getting back into wine made in the vineyard, as they say, a natural wine.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a long period where, there's nothing on the bottle that tells you any difference. And is this a highly manipulated wine? Is it not a highly manipulated wine? I mean,
Yeah.
the price doesn't tell you the difference for that. And most things don't tell you the difference. So, we will see how it goes. That's going to be really interesting.
And I think a holistic approach, how we look at producers, because like you said, Real Minero is one of the bigger ones, but they again make 5,000 bottles a year. That's, if you look at that from a wine perspective, that's nothing. So producers like that are a great model because they are able to make a living. They're able to have a business model that works, and they're able to employ people, and they're able to focus on sustainability too. They are cultivating these agave varietals that would potentially be lost if people were like them who had a strong financial position weren't able to do. You know what I mean? So I don't want to get too distracted by the fact thinking that, we need to always stay small, because sometimes bigger producers do help a market, just like Jackson Family Wines. I think they're a great company as far as wineries go. And they have a big portfolio of brands, and they're still doing a lot of good in the world. But even by comparison, there's no comparison of like Real Minero and Jackson, you know what I mean? Real Minero is still very small. So, it would be great to always buy tiny batch mezcal, but that's not sustainable, and we're never going to get tiny batch mezcal in the States. So ultimately, we have to have some sort of give and take as far as what we decide is good, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe the best case scenario is that some of these larger producers, and by the way, Real Minero, I think I misspoke. It's not that they're large, but you know what they did that was kind of the first remarkable thing in the market, or kind of what I feel like they're known for in Oaxaca, is they boosted the price.
Yeah.
So they're one of the first ones to say, it's $100 a bottle or whatever.
But
right?
even in Oaxaca, I think it's $50 or something like that, the equivalent of $50, whereas in the States it's like $100.
Yeah.
So but so is Mezcaloteca. Like Mezcaloteca, NC2, they're selling their mezcal for basically somewhere between $35 to $50. And then you go to the producer and you buy it for between $5 to $10 a liter at most. And I just feel like I'm undervaluing them in a way. You know what I mean? Like, I understand that they would sell it for a lot less to somebody else. but I feel like the value for what we're getting should be so much more, and that's the only way we can put a real price tag on what mezcal should be. I'm not
Right, yeah,
elitist,
so, you know,
not
like
rich,
my
but
fantasy.
yeah.
Yeah, my fantasy, and this is what I'm always telling all the mezcaleros, especially when I get a little buzz on and, you know, it's getting late at night and I'm out in the village. And I'm telling them, you know, you have something priceless.
Yeah.
You guys are already millionaires. If you would just take 5 liters aside of each of your batches, put them in glass, put them aside and, you know, and keep them there. And when some people come, you know, who aren't buying, you know, 10 and 20 and 30 and 50 liters, you know, have something really special to sell them for 50, 60, $100 a liter right there on the spot.
Yeah.
That they're never going to get anywhere else, that doesn't exist anywhere else. And, you know, get that kind of knowledge out there so that, you know, people understand, well, I'm not going to buy something like this at even my best liquor store in the States.
Yeah.
But when I go to Oaxaca, I could go out to a village and I could meet one of these master mezcaleros. And if I've got the money in my pocket, you know, they're going to have something special for me. So I've preached that to them, you know, like all the time. But actually, let's see, Marcelo, this guy has started to do this, and his son, he now has a bodega of library, what I'm calling library mezcals. So if you go there, he's got, and Alberto Vasquez in Solo de Vega, he does that. So if you go out to his palenque, he's charging more than anybody else around him. But he's also got at least 10, if not 20, fantastic different varietals, all there in, you know, small quantities that you can get a few liters at a time. So that's a magical experience when you go out to the palenque and you meet one of these guys and talk through the story and you see, you know, what they do and how different all their methods are. So that was another point, the other kind of segue point I wanted to make is that, you know, the magic of this, if it can be preserved, to me, is how, you know, it's so much more of an art than a science.
Yeah.
So as we develop it commercially and we see stuff in the States and a commercial model develops, it's going to become, you know, it's a science. And the risk is that, like someone like Rodolfo Juan, who now is one of 4 palenques out of what was 70 palenques of his neighbors 10 years ago, you know, what's the next step? I was talking with him last time I was there. The next step is, you know, he gets hired for $100,000 a year to go, you know, work a column still somewhere and oversee production. And, you know, and he's very wary of that because that is happening, right? And so then the village production just dies. They're just growing maguey, and that tradition kind of, you know, fades and then maybe comes back later. So the magic to me is, you know, so many of these things we love in these mezcals, out of my experience, are because of the way it's an art and not a science. They don't know what the temperature is of their cooking. So they use the same wood, cut the same size, put in the same proportions into the earth oven. That's how they control the cooking.
Right.
There's no, you know, thermometer put in there. There's no other way that they know what's happening on that. Fermentation, I mean, each step of the way is done by, you know, taste and smell and tradition. And in each village, somewhere in the past, one of the palenqueros did something a little bit different, and it resulted in a good mezcal. And so they've repeated that. And so you end up in each of these villages, if you go mezcaloring in the different regions, each village has these different styles. And to me, that's so much of the magic. I mean, you know, you get up to Ixcatlan and they're doing leather fermented, clay pot still, hand mashed papalome. And they're doing that because that's what they know. And a little anecdote on that. I was up there. One of the things I do when I go out to the villages, I take pictures, and they always go, well, you're taking my picture. Will you bring me a picture? So I go, yeah, I'm going to print a picture and I'll bring you prints when I next come back. So I have all these prints of, you know, the mezcaleros and the places. So I'm up there and I'm sorting through the prints to give one of the mezcaleros his prints. And as I'm sorting through, you know, his wife's sitting next to him, and I get past a print of another mezcalero with his, you know, big stone wheel, the Tahona, right, with the mule that mashes the maguey. And she stops. Greg, what's that? And I said, oh, well, that's, that's how they grind the maguey down in San Juan del Rio and in the, Zapotec region. And she's going to her husband, she's hitting him, let's get one of those. Because, they're hand mashing it. And it hits me. I'm going, this is what's so magical about this mezcal is, it's not because they've chosen this method. That's the way they do it, because that's how they've always done it.
Right.
And so, we've got this evolution that's happening now where people come into the market, they learn new things, and they start to take techniques from other villages, and you get, that kind of dilution or loss of these really magical flavors that, that you can't get back.
Yeah, but I think there could be an argument that it's very similar to natural wine in a way, right? Like I'm not, when you say natural wine, I'm like, like I like some natural wine, but I don't like dirty wine, right? So I think there's a balance, right? And I don't want to be against any upward momentum, right? I don't want to be against people being able to advance economically in society. I don't think I want to be against like people taking their jobs if that's necessarily going to help them. But I hear you. I think that's right. But I don't think that mezcal just goes away if we have little tiny producers completely go away. I think there could be co-ops. There could be still that tradition and culture of things. And I don't think adopting certain technology is bad. Like you said, the mezcalero that you were talking to, he loves shredders, right? And at other places, they're still using a machete, like to hack up the agave. And which one is right, So I think at the end of the day, it's an impact on flavor. It's, there's definitely obviously so much more tradition involved, and it is so different from tequila, even just from a flavor perspective and then the variety perspective. So I feel like there's a romanticism involved with mezcal that people who, like you, who've been loving mezcal a lot longer than I, that is always going to be there. And then you're going to always yearn for the loss of that to a degree. But I think that if it's going to go somewhat mainstream, we have to be okay with losing a little bit of that, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, that's the world we're in. It's a kind of an inevitable process.
Yeah.
And people in Oaxaca are resistant to it. They're very suspicious of it when you get into, these are autonomous villages. They don't recognize the federal government. When you get out in Campo, a place like Ixcatlan, these Sola de Vega villages, there's no police, there's no government, and they are very fiercely independent. And they don't want to really change. They don't want to lose that independence. You'll run into that phrase a lot of, I'm poor, but I'm free, right? And it's an interesting sentiment that I think it's, there's a historical
Big time. Yeah.
sentiment in that part of Mexico, because you get that a lot, and it applies to the mezcal because to me, there's just a really interesting thing in how some of these flavors. At the end of the day, right, as you've said, right, people, they want to make a living, right? So what are they going to do? If they can sell, well, I'll give you an example. This wild Papalome from Ixcatlan. This comes from Cupertino, Mendoza. He has no market. He only sells to people like me in the village.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have any clients.
Right.
There's one guy in the town who has clients. His name is Amado. Great guy, him and his son. They're actually profiled in the New Yorker a few years ago. So you could read about it, I want to say around 2016. It's a nice article.
Yeah.
And the writer, goes up to Ixcatlan and tastes these leather fermented mezcals with Amado. Well, Amado has clients now. So he has people who want to do production. And you can't produce this way for larger batches. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you're starting to see little changes here and there.
Yeah.
In how these mezcals are in what they're producing there. And so some of the, it's not that it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. it's just the way things happen. So I guess where I'm going with this is we're kind of at this interesting golden age right now. On the one hand, the fact that this market is happening and all this excitement is happening is encouraging everybody, someone like Cupertino, who has no market, to make, batches of mezcal as well as he can, because he knows he can sell them. He's got someone like me who will come and buy 30 liters with my friends or something like that.
Amazing.
And at the same time, these very same forces are already operating in Oaxaca to, kind of change and roll over some of these production techniques that, we see it come back. We see it come back in coffee. We see it come back in wine. Some of these so-called, lost kinds of methods come back. And maybe we skip that step in mezcal. Maybe we can keep those, individual idiosyncrasies in the village. For example, Miahuatlan, did you go out to Amatlan, San Luis Amatlan? So this gets into this wood, talking about the wood smoke flavors.
Mm-hmm.
And you go out to the Miahuatlan area. One of the things that always struck me out there is how pronounced the wood smoke flavors are in comparison to some other areas.
They like that.
And part of that is they don't use pure green oak. And in fact, in some of the villages, they don't use any green oak. In Amatlan, they use mesquite.
Mm-hmm.
They'll only put green oak in there if they don't.
They like the smokiness too, is what I was
right.
What I was
well,
told.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's their flavor of mezcal. So that, and it's terrific. It's a really great mezcal. It has a very unique flavor. The mesquite comes through really strong on their mezcals, but it's a really nice flavor. But that's something, if they get a contract with one of the exporters
Mm-hmm.
who needs more production, well, that exporter is going to tell them, I need you to use green oak. And that's what they're going to do.
Sure. Yeah.
And, that's just the process. That's kind of the process of what's happening.
Yeah, because the exporter is going to, but that happens with wine too. That's kind of the world that we live in. So if we want more mezcal and we want mezcal to be more mainstream, I guess that's the sacrifice that some of these producers are going to have to make. And then if you personally want to go seek out more traditional methods of mezcal and more traditional styles, you have to go to Mexico, and not necessarily Oaxaca even, because Oaxaca has become very popular, right, from a tourist perspective. And there's other places in Mexico that are also making mezcal and making some wonderful mezcal that aren't as popular yet. So you could probably find some really interesting styles too.
Yeah, I'm wondering. I can't wait to get back. I'm wondering what it's going to be like. I was just in touch with the maker of this Papalome by WhatsApp. WhatsApp, what a wonderful thing, huh? He's out in this little tiny village, and we're in touch. And I asked him how it's going, and he explains to me what some other friends have told me too, which is, the village is shut. You can't go in or can't go out.
I know.
So how long is that going to go on?
I know.
Because mescaloring, is all about just heading out in the campo without any real destination, following the maguey. And if all of a sudden you're not welcome out there, that would be a sad story.
Seriously. Well, I feel like that'll be our next trip once things do fully open up and things are a little bit, I don't even want to say this summer, and I don't know this fall. It's kind of scary, but if by this time next year I can leave the country, my first trip will probably be back to Oaxaca. So.
Yeah, that'd be great. Hopefully I'll be there and we'll do a tasting.
Yes, I
We'll
love that. It was nice to meet you in person, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Yeah, likewise. Cheers.
Cheers to you.
Yeah.
I think we
great,
should.
And great talk. It was good fun.
Yeah.
Too bad we lost Wes, but.
I know. I'm sorry, Wes.
Oh, well.
I'm sorry we went so long over. He told me usually about an hour, and now it's 7:02. So I feel bad if anybody's out there. Well, so
all
nice.
Right. Well, happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday.
I don't even know who's out. Is it just you and me, or are there more people out there?
I have no idea. But if anybody's still out there, cheers. Have a great weekend.
All right.
Thank you for chatting with us about some mezcal.
Oh, always fun. My
Bye.
favorite thing. Bye.